made in a small, surreal outdoor feely palace where lines and lines of people are walking single file to take their seats. This time around, of course, instead of a mockumentary on the screen, it's a Kachina doll hanging in effigy representing John's response. There are a couple movie posters advertising the mockumentary. This is the Savage here, hanging in death, and here in the lower center is World Controller Mustafa Mond, no longer smiling like he was in painting number 3. He's just learned of John's suicide, and although I'm taking a major artistic liberty, I'm having the police come to escort Mr. Mond away to an island of his own choosing. In the 1980 film, which I absolutely adore, director Bert Brinkenhoff has Mustafa Mond computer erase and electro shred the lighthouse footage. And maintain his position as world controller, which is one of the very, very few things I don't like about the film, which I think otherwise is pretty much perfect. I prefer to think that after John's suicide is recorded, it leaks like other news stories are prone to leaking. The other world controllers catch wind, and Mond is stripped of his title and cast out on his all-powerful ass. I like the idea of a little karmic justice coming back to Mustafa for the retaliation he seeks against the Savage and even Bernard, and the deportation of Thomas and his ego and all the rest. Mond watches as the lighthouse footage, represented by these falling triangles falling off the conveyors here, falls into these, I don't know what you call them, abyss of internet knowledge. They basically are electro shredded into the abyss of carnal internet knowledge, never to, or hopefully, never to recirculate again, though we all know that's not entirely possible. This is mockumentary filmmaker Darwin Bonaparte, in the sunglasses and the beret, in the lower right holding the bullhorn, fingering Mond to the police, kind of saying, hey, there's your guy right there. Down here is the editing room where the Feely writers were going to start working on last night's footage for the sequel, when it dawns on them that, hey, John took his own life. This is a symbolic John with a symbolic Lenina, who I pointed out earlier in the video, making out like they did in the orgy the night before, and in, painting number 8 shortly before John blew up on her, about to fall and also be electro shredded. Their romance really never coming to fruition and basically never having existed in the first place. The ghost of John the Youth makes another final appearance behind his own lifeless hanging body, motioning with his hand in a manner that could be interpreted either as pointing to the corpse or giving Mond the bird, whichever you prefer as the viewer. The native chief from painting number 1 also returns to hold the arm of the young ghost of John the Savage, watching as Mond starts to be escorted away. The Zuni masks that came back from New Mexico to haunt Thomas Graham Bell in painting number 6 have also returned to come from Mustafa Mond. This colorful tropical bird is a portent of the island that Mond's going to be sent to, the tropical island. And finally, the last piece of symbolism of the entire series, the artsy-fartsy bleeding heart beatnik alpha holding the clapboard, ready to close the final scene. I believe at this point I've said all I can think to say about my interpretation of the novel via the painting series. I have no doubt I'll look back later in life and say, why didn't I say this, or I should have said that, or I can't believe I forgot to mention the other. But the show is Friday. I've spent 13 and a half months on the project total, and I like to think I did my job. Um, for the technical aspects, I painted on 1/8 of an inch untempered masonite panels, thoroughly sanded, sealed, resanded, and resealed both sides before starting. No computers or mixed media were used or are ever used in the creation of my paintings. Paintings were 24 by 20 inches vertical, or if you're, one of the 99% or living, one of the people living in 99% of the rest of the world that uses the metric system, about 61 by 51 centimeters. I used mostly Liquitex heavy body acrylic paint, my favorite brand. I tried to stay away from the fluorescence I used in many of the video game paintings I did before Brave New World, though I did use a few in painting number 8 for sure, particularly a little bit of the red in the host's suit. All 12 were signed in the year 2018, one per month. The first one January, the second one in February, and so on. I wrote 3-paragraph descriptions for each one on my website, ianyoungfineart.com, which I highly encourage everyone who wants to familiarize themselves with the book to read in order. Of course, I highly recommend reading the original 1932 novel by Aldous Huxley outright, which was supposedly influenced by a novel I have not read, 1924's We by Russian author Yevgeny Zamyatin, and apologies to any Russians out there if I pronounced those wrong, which I'm sure I probably did. I want to emphasize again how immensely I was helped by the 1980 excellent film adaptation directed by Burt Brinkenhoff, starring Ron Superfly O'Neill as Mustafa Mond and counterculture icon Bud Cort as Bernard Marx, as well as the free audiobook versions on various websites, which are also a tremendous help. The first showing of the 12 paintings is this Friday, November 2nd, 2018, at the Jones Gallery of Kansas City, Missouri. The same place I had my first ever gallery show back in 2012. I'd like to thank David Jones for believing in me enough to allow me to show at his gallery, without which this series may never exist. I, of course, thank Fred Whitehead, who not only purchased all 12 of the Brave New World paintings, but my first painting I ever sold at a gallery, Rumor Mills, at the same Jones Gallery back in 2012. I mentioned in video number 10 or 11 how the Helmholtz Watson character is one of the brightest and noblest characters in the whole novel. One of those people, when you look back on your life, you say, gosh, I was really, really lucky to have met that person. And Fred will definitely always be thought of as such by me for as long as I'm alive. I personally know a lot of people who make pretty good money and could easily afford to pay me or some other much more talented artist than me enough to produce something timeless that everybody can enjoy generation after generation after generation, but most of them intentionally choose not to. Instead, they use it to take their kids on cross-country trips or take selfies in front of sports stadiums and theme parks, or they build enormous game rooms or buy boats or eat three-figure dinners they've got to tell you all about, which, don't get me wrong, is their right to do, absolutely. But, and it keeps the folks providing those services employed, of course, but it doesn't make the human race smarter. It doesn't help anybody evolve or learn anything when they spend their money like that. Even when they donate to charities, yeah, they're giving people fish and writing it off their taxes and looking like philanthropists on paper, but they're not teaching anybody to fish. I've never been a big believer that buying things that are taxed at 10% or less, or donating money to people who are going to be asking for more the very next day does a whole lot of good in the long run for society. I think using your money to teach someone to fish for life, or create something mass groups of people will enjoy long after the both of you are dead, is a much safer bet, and in my obviously biased opinion, more noble. And Fred and all the art collectors, and certainly all of my art collectors, rich or poor, seem to understand that concept. The people I know with money who eschew buying art in favor of bragging how high their property taxes are on their boats, I think they're all dumber than a box of rocks. I'd also like to thank my wonderful girlfriend, Kristen, who put up with me pulling my hair out and working around the clock and rereading and rediscussing and rehashing one of the most depressing and harrowing novels ever written over and over without leaving me. Thank you so much, Kristen. I really love you for that. I thank my dad, of course, who assisted me immensely in the project, who I argued with stubbornly on numerous occasions when he told me to fix this, or something could be tweaked, or something could be a little bit better that was for my own good, that I wound up getting mad at him about. Sorry again, Dad, and thanks again, really. I'd like to thank my mom, Vicky, for believing in me, my brother, Tyler, my sister-in-law, Khaki, their kids, Benny and Jade. The four of them let me stay at their house on my way back from visiting the New Mexico reservation and countless other trips. I'd like to thank the rest of my extended family, probably too big to list by name, though I will give a special kudos to my fellow painter and grandpa, Eugene Young, and also one to my cousin, Chris Hoynes, for buying a print from me a few years ago, when I really needed the money. I'd like to give professional thanks all around to my previous collectors, gallery owners, art directors, social media experts, computer geeks, and so on. Jeff Osborne, image specialist and Jones Gallery associate, who scanned the paintings, Todd Weiner, who sold over a dozen of my large-scale game paintings at his Kansas City galleries, Robert Bucati, one of Todd's clients, who wound up taking 10 of them, Matt Kennedy in Southern California, who's currently representing 9 originals from the arcade series I did prior to Brave New World, out in Gallery 30 South in Pasadena, Jordan Rychek of the Peekaboo Gallery, who was kind enough to show and help me move some of the game paintings with Matt through his grand opening at that gallery. I'd also like to thank longtime friend and vintage t-shirt guru Patrick Klima for allowing me to sell lots and lots of early paintings on eBay through his Wyco Vintage store when I was ready to start letting them go, and wound up being very important. I'd like to thank all the other friends and acquaintances and colleagues and professionals I've done business with over the years, however brief. I assure you, your help and experiences played some small part in the ultimate completion of this series. Truly, no one gets to make a phenomenal art series in their lifetime without a great supporting cast, with them every step of the way. I couldn't have done it without the people who make and deliver my paint, or my brushes, or my canvases, built my drawing table, delivered my food, or provided my electricity and gas and all the rest. No one accomplishes anything on their own, ever. And there's a phrase from the world state of 2540 AD that I do agree with, that I painted into painting number 3: everyone belongs to everyone else. And I think that's the phrase that I'd like to close with. Visit IanYoungFineArt.com to find out what's next. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great night.